The moment Aaron stepped into the vacation home, a strange sense of unease settled over him, like a shadow lingering in the corners of what was supposed to be their sanctuary. The house, nestled on the edge of a serene lake in upstate New York, had always been a place of laughter and relaxation. He and Lauren had spent countless weekends here, unwinding from the hustle of city life. But this time, something was different. Aaron dropped the bags by the front door and called out, "Lauren? You coming?" Lauren appeared moments later, a faint smile on her lips, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She'd been glued to it for weeks now, always quick to dismiss his questions with a casual, "It's just work." Aaron wanted to believe her. After all, she was a marketing director and had always been busy, but lately her excuses felt thinner, her explanations less convincing. "Yeah, sorry," she said, slipping the phone into her pocket, "just wrapping something up." Aaron studied her as she passed him. She looked beautiful, as always, her wavy brown hair falling over her shoulders and her hazel eyes bright against her tan skin. But there was a distance in her gaze, a quiet detachment that made his stomach churn. "I thought we agreed this weekend was just for us," he said, keeping his tone light but firm. "It is," Lauren replied, already heading toward the kitchen. "I won't let work get in the way. Promise." Aaron nodded, forcing himself to believe her. He followed her into the kitchen, where she busied herself unpacking groceries, but as the hours passed, that nagging feeling in his chest refused to fade. Later that evening, Lauren excused herself to take a call. "It's just the team," she said over her shoulder, disappearing onto the back deck. Aaron watched her through the sliding glass door, her silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the porch light. She laughed at something, her voice light and carefree in a way it hadn't been with him in months. Aaron clenched his jaw. Maybe he was paranoid. Maybe he was imagining things, but deep down he knew he wasn't. The turning point came the next morning. Lauren had gone out for a morning walk, something she rarely did, leaving Aaron alone in the house. As he sipped his coffee, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from a messaging app he didn't recognize. At first he hesitated. Snooping wasn't his style. But the way her phone vibrated again, then again, as if someone on the other end was desperate for her attention, made his blood run cold. He picked it up, his hands trembling. The messages were short, flirtatious, and unmistakably intimate. "Tyler, can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. Tyler, you looked amazing. Still thinking about you." Aaron felt like he'd been punched in the gut. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was reading. The timestamp on the messages confirmed his worst fear: they'd been sent while they were here, in their vacation home, the place he'd thought was sacred. When Lauren returned from her walk, Aaron was waiting for her in the living room, the phone in his hand. She froze when she saw him, her face pale, her eyes darting to the phone. "What's this, Lauren?" he demanded, his voice sharp and cold. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Who the hell is Tyler?" he continued, standing now, his 6-foot frame towering over her. "And why is he talking about last night like it was some kind of date?" Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but Aaron didn't care. He was done being manipulated, done doubting himself. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice shaky. "Don't insult my intelligence," Aaron snapped. "I read the messages, all of them. So unless you've got some magical explanation for why another man is saying he can't wait to see you again, I'd suggest you start telling me the truth." Lauren sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "Didn't mean for what to happen," he pressed, his voice rising. "You don't just accidentally end up in bed with someone else, Lauren." She flinched at his words but didn't deny them. Instead, her silence confirmed everything. "How long has this been going on?" Aaron demanded, pacing now, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "How long have you been lying to me?" "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Aaron stopped pacing, his chest heaving with anger. "A few months," he repeated, his tone dripping with disgust. "So while I've been working my ass off, planning trips, trying to keep our marriage alive, you've been sneaking around with some guy named Tyler." "It wasn't like that," Lauren said, her voice cracking. "I was lonely, Aaron. You're always so busy with work, always so distant. Don't you dare try to blame this on me, Aaron shot back, his voice shaking with rage. I've been distant because I've been trying to provide for us, for this life we built together. And this is how you repay me, by turning our vacation home into your personal hookup spot. Lauren sobbed, but Aaron felt no sympathy. He'd given her everything, and she'd betrayed him in the worst way possible. You're not staying here, he said finally, his voice cold and resolute. Pack your things, I'll drive you back to the city, and you can figure out the rest from there. But you will never set foot in this house again. Do you understand me? Lauren looked up at him, her tear-streaked face filled with regret. Aaron, please. No, he interrupted, his tone final. You made your choice, Lauren, and now you'll have to live with it. The drive back to the city was suffocating. Lauren sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring out the window as if the trees rushing past could somehow absolve her. Aaron gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white, his jaw clenched in a silent rage that filled the car like a storm cloud about to burst. He hadn't said a word since they left the lake house. She'd tried once, her voice small and cracking, but he'd cut her off with a single glare that made it clear there was nothing left to discuss. When they pulled into the driveway of their townhouse, Aaron killed the engine and turned to her, his expression unreadable but his eyes blazing. Get your things, he said flatly. I'll wait here. Lauren opened her mouth as if to protest but thought better of it. Without a word, she climbed out of the car and went inside. Aaron watched her through the windshield, his chest rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths, as if holding himself together was the only thing keeping him from shattering. When she returned 20 minutes later, a suitcase in one hand and a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, Aaron didn't so much as glance at her. He popped the trunk and waited until she loaded her things before handing her the spare key to her old car. You'll need this, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Aaron. Don't, he interrupted, his tone sharp as a knife. You made your bed. Go lie in it. Her eyes welled up, but he looked away, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of seeing him break. He started the engine again as soon as she got in her car, pulling out of the driveway without so much as a backward glance. By the time Aaron returned to the lake house, night had fallen. The silence inside was deafening, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes the air feel heavier. He poured himself a whiskey and sat on the deck, staring out at the dark water, replaying everything in his mind. He hated how blindsided he felt. How had he missed it? The late nights, the sudden interest in her appearance, the constant texting, he should have seen it coming. Instead, he'd been oblivious, trusting her even when that nagging voice in his head had tried to warn him. The next morning, Aaron woke up early, his body aching from the restless night. The house felt foreign now, tainted by the memories of her laughter echoing in the halls, her betrayal lurking in every corner. He spent the day cleaning, scrubbing every surface as if he could erase what had happened. By afternoon, he was exhausted, but the chaos in his mind drove him to keep going. He emptied the drawers she'd left untouched, boxed up her belongings, and shoved them into the storage closet. It wasn't until he reached the master bathroom that he found it, a small white envelope tucked beneath a stack of folded towels. His name was scrawled across the front in her handwriting, the letters uneven and hurried. Aaron stared at it for a long moment before tearing it open, his heart pounding against his ribs. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded into thirds. Aaron. I know it's too late to explain, but I need you to know the truth. Tyler was more than a mistake, but not in the way you think. He wasn't some random guy. He was. The words stopped abruptly, the sentence unfinished as if she'd been interrupted or changed her mind. Aaron flipped the paper over, but the back was blank. He read the note again, his brow furrowed. The name Tyler felt heavier now, weighted with more than just anger. He didn't want to care. Didn't want to give her the satisfaction of even wondering who Tyler was. But the incomplete sentence gnawed at him. Why hadn't she finished it? By evening, Aaron decided to do something he'd promised himself he wouldn't look Tyler up. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, typing the name into the search bar alongside the city they lived in. The results were overwhelming at first, but after narrowing them down, one profile stood out. Tyler Jacobs, 34. Business consultant. Married. Married. Aaron leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. He clicked on the profile, scrolling through photos of Tyler with a striking brunette woman, their arms wrapped around each other, their smiles wide. The timeline didn't make sense. If Tyler was married, why was he sneaking around with Lauren? Aaron's gaze shifted to the woman in the photos. Her name was Rachel, according to the captions, and she looked happy, blissfully unaware of what her husband had been up to. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Lauren wasn't just a cheater. Tyler was too. Aaron closed the laptop and sat in silence, his mind racing. The thought of reaching out to Rachel crossed his mind, but he pushed it aside. It wasn't his place to destroy someone else's life, even if it felt like the only way to make sense of his own. Instead, he poured himself another drink and stared out at the lake, the water calm and unbothered by the storm brewing inside him. The following week, Aaron returned to the city. He'd taken a leave of absence from work, needing time to process everything. The townhouse felt emptier than ever, but he couldn't bring himself to sell it, not yet anyway. One afternoon, while sorting through the last of Lauren's things, he found another envelope. This one didn't have his name on it, but was marked private. He hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in the same hurried scrawl as the first note. Rachel, I can't keep this from you anymore. Tyler and I. Aaron stopped reading, his stomach turning. The letter wasn't meant for him. It was meant for Rachel. He folded it back up and stared at it, his mind spinning. Lauren had written it, but had she ever sent it? Did Rachel already know, or was her world about to implode just like Aaron's had? For the first time in weeks, Aaron felt a glimmer of control. He couldn't change what had happened to him, but maybe he could decide how this story ended. He grabbed his coat and left the house, the letter tucked safely in his pocket. Rachel Jacobs opened the door cautiously, her sharp blue eyes narrowing at Aaron. Behind her, the faint sound of children laughing filtered through the house. She held the door halfway, one hand on the frame, her posture guarded. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but wary. Aaron hesitated. Standing face to face with her made the situation even more surreal. She was tall, poised, and dressed casually in jeans and a cardigan, her hair pulled into a neat ponytail. For a moment he felt like an intruder, disrupting the carefully crafted image of her life. But he knew the truth now, and she deserved to know it too. "My name's Aaron," he began, his voice steady. "I think we need to talk. It's about Tyler." The shift in her expression was subtle, but Aaron caught it, a flicker of fear, confusion, and something darker before she composed herself. She stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door closed behind her, cutting off the sound of the kids. "What's this about?" Rachel asked, her voice low. Aaron reached into his coat pocket and handed her the letter. "This is from my wife. Or, I guess, my soon-to-be ex-wife. She wrote it to you but never sent it." Rachel took the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. She unfolded the letter and began to read, her lips tightening as her eyes scanned the page. Aaron watched as her expression shifted, her jaw clenching, her free hand balling into a fist at her side. When she finished, she folded the letter neatly and held it out to him. "She's your wife." "For now," Aaron said bitterly. Rachel exhaled sharply, her shoulders stiff. "I knew something was off. He's been distant, making excuses." But this, she shook her head, her voice breaking. "How long?" "Months," Aaron replied. "At least since the summer, maybe longer." Rachel let out a hollow laugh, one hand coming to her forehead as she paced a small circle on the porch. "Unbelievable. I've been blaming myself, thinking I wasn't enough, and all this time." Aaron didn't interrupt. He let her process it, knowing exactly how she felt. The betrayal, the humiliation, the way it knocked the foundation out from under you. Finally, Rachel turned to him, her eyes blazing. "Why did you come here? What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything," Aaron said firmly. "But I thought you deserved to know. I'm not the kind of person who can sit back and let someone else live a lie." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you for telling me." Before Aaron could reply, the front door creaked open. A little girl peeked out, her curly hair falling into her face. "Mommy, who's that?" Rachel's face softened instantly. She knelt down, brushing the girl's hair back. "Just a neighbor, sweetie. Go back inside. I'll be there in a minute." The girl glanced at Aaron, her eyes curious, before retreating into the house. Rachel straightened, her mask of composure slipping back into place. "I need to deal with this," she said, her voice tight. Aaron nodded. "Good luck." As he turned to leave, Rachel called after him. "Wait." He stopped, looking over his shoulder. "You're not alone in this," she said. "If you need anything, or if there's anything I should know, let me know." Aaron hesitated, then gave her a curt nod. "Same to you." The drive back to the townhouse felt lighter somehow, as if confronting Rachel had lifted a weight off his chest. He didn't feel vindictive, but there was a strange comfort in knowing the truth was out there, no longer festering in silence. 2 days later, Aaron was in his office, sorting through paperwork for the divorce, when his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Hello." "Aaron, it's Rachel." He sat up straighter. "Rachel, is everything okay?" "No," she said bluntly. "Tyler came clean. He admitted everything. And then some." Aaron frowned. "What do you mean?" Rachel's voice was sharp, every word laced with anger. Apparently Lauren wasn't the only one. He's been cheating for years. Different women. Different lies. I don't even know who he is anymore. Aaron leaned back in his chair, the revelation hitting him like a tidal wave. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Don't be. I'm done crying over him," Rachel said, her tone steelier now. "I'm calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow. He's not getting away with this." "Good," Aaron said, his respect for her growing. There was a pause. Then Rachel added, "I thought you should know. I didn't want you thinking this was just some fling. It's bigger than that." "Thanks for telling me," Aaron said. "And if you need anything, let me know." "I will," she said. And then she was gone. In the weeks that followed, Aaron threw himself into rebuilding his life. He finalized the divorce, sold the townhouse, and moved into a new apartment closer to work. He started going out more, reconnecting with friends he'd lost touch with during his marriage. Slowly but surely, he began to feel like himself again. One evening, as he was leaving a coffee shop, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel. Rachel said, "How's life on the other side?" Aaron smiled faintly and typed back. Aaron said, still standing, "You." Rachel said, "Same. Barely. Want to meet up sometime? Compare war stories." He hesitated for a moment, then replied. Aaron said, "Sure. Why not?" A week later, they met for drinks at a quiet bar downtown. It was awkward at first, the shared history between them heavy in the air. But as the evening went on, the tension gave way to laughter and camaraderie. They talked about everything: Lauren, Tyler, their kids, their plans for the future. By the time they left, Aaron felt lighter, as if a new chapter had finally begun. As he walked home that night, Aaron realized something. He wasn't just moving on, he was moving forward. And for the first time in months, that felt like enough. Aaron leaned against the counter in his new apartment, staring down at the stack of mail he'd just brought in. Most of it was junk credit card offers, local flyers, but one envelope caught his attention. It was from Lauren's lawyer, thick and formal. He sighed and tossed it aside. The divorce settlement was nearly complete, and he was done bending over backward to negotiate anything with her. His phone buzzed from the kitchen island. He glanced over and saw Rachel's name pop up. Rachel said, "Can we meet? Something came up. Won't take long." Aaron frowned, his curiosity piqued. Rachel wasn't the type for idle chatter, and any message from her usually meant something serious. Aaron said, "Sure." "Where?" Rachel said, "The coffee shop near your place." 30 minutes. Aaron replied with a quick okay and grabbed his jacket. The coffee shop was quiet when he arrived, the late afternoon lull keeping the place mostly empty. Rachel was already there, seated at a corner table with a steaming mug in front of her. She looked sharper than usual, her blazer tailored perfectly, her hair swept back into a bun. But her eyes gave her away tired and restless, like she hadn't slept much. "You look like you've had a week," Aaron said as he sat down across from her. Rachel smirked faintly. "That obvious." He gestured at her untouched drink. "What's going on?" She slid a folder across the table toward him. He hesitated before opening it, the contents hitting him like a freight train. Photocopies of emails, hotel receipts, and even a photo of Tyler and Lauren leaving a restaurant together. "What the hell is this?" Aaron asked, his voice low and sharp. "Proof," Rachel said, her tone clipped. "My lawyer's been digging. Tyler wasn't just cheating with Lauren. There were others. But Lauren's the only one who kept a record." Aaron's jaw tightened as he flipped through the pages. So she knew. She didn't just know, Rachel said, leaning forward, her voice barely above a whisper. She was blackmailing him. Aaron froze, the words hanging heavily between them. "She kept all this," Rachel continued, tapping the folder, "as leverage. My lawyer found out she was threatening to tell me everything unless Tyler paid her to keep quiet. Thousands of dollars, Aaron. Over months." He pushed the folder away, his stomach churning. "I can't believe this. She was cheating on me and trying to profit from it." Rachel nodded grimly. "It gets worse. Tyler claims she was planning to go public anyway. She's the reason he told me everything. He was trying to get ahead of it." Aaron laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. "Of course she was. Why not blow up everyone else's life while she's at it?" Rachel's expression softened slightly. "I thought you should know. This affects both of us." Aaron shook his head, trying to process everything. "What are you going to do?" Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've already filed for divorce. My lawyer's using all of this to make sure Tyler doesn't walk away with a dime more than he deserves. And you." He exhaled slowly. "The divorce is almost final. But after this, I might need to rethink the terms. She's not getting away with this, Rachel." "Good," Rachel said firmly. "She doesn't deserve to." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them. Finally, Rachel stood, smoothing her jacket. "Keep the folder," she said. "You might need it." Aaron nodded, his grip tightening on the edge of the table. "Thanks for telling me." "Take care of yourself, Aaron," she said before walking out. When he returned to his apartment, Aaron couldn't sit still. He paced the living room, the folders staring back at him from the coffee table like a taunt. Every page he'd read replayed in his mind, each revelation more infuriating than the last. Finally, he grabbed his phone and dialed Lauren. She picked up after a few rings, her tone cautious. "Aaron." "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold. "Now." "I really don't think." "You don't think?" he snapped. "You don't think it's time for you to explain why you've been blackmailing your boyfriend while married to me?" There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," Aaron growled. "Rachel showed me everything. The emails, the receipts, the threats. You've been extorting him while lying to me, and you think I wouldn't find out." She was silent for a moment, then said weakly, "Aaron, it's not what you think." "Stop," he barked, his voice echoing in the room. "I don't want your excuses. I want the truth. Why did you do it? Was screwing him not enough? You had to milk him for money too." Her voice cracked as she responded. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was angry, okay? Angry at you for ignoring me, angry at him for lying to me about Rachel. I wanted control." Aaron laughed bitterly. "Control? Is that what you call it? Ruining lives so you can feel better about your own mistakes?" "Aaron, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up. But it wasn't just about the money. I didn't know what else to do." "You didn't know what else to do," he repeated, his tone scathing. "Here's an idea, Lauren. Don't cheat. Don't manipulate. Don't destroy everything we built because you're too selfish to deal with your own problems." She started crying, but he felt nothing. "You've taken enough from me," he said coldly. "The settlement? It's off the table. I'm not giving you a cent more than the bare minimum, and if you try to fight it, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been up to." Aaron. We're done, Lauren, he interrupted, his voice final. Completely. Don't call me again. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the couch, his chest heaving. For the first time in months, he felt something close to closure. The next morning, Aaron met with his lawyer, the folder in hand. By the end of the day, the divorce terms had been renegotiated, leaving Lauren with little more than her personal belongings. Weeks later, as the final papers were signed and the last threads of their marriage severed, Aaron walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than he had in years. Rachel was waiting outside, leaning against her car. She smiled faintly when she saw him. Free at last, she asked. Free at last, Aaron replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. Drinks tonight, she offered. Yeah, he said, his voice steady. Drinks sound good. As they drove off, Aaron glanced at the rearview mirror, watching the courthouse fade into the distance. For the first time, he didn't feel like looking back.